Hi, friends. Today I'm going to tell you a story that will carry you slowly into sleep. If you listen carefully, your eyes will grow heavy, and before you even realize it, you'll drift off into a peaceful, deep sleep. So, get comfortable, let your head rest, let your body sink into the softness around you. And now, let's step into a quiet little town, a place where hearts waited for letters, a place where love traveled across oceans and time, and where one letter that never came changed everything. In the heart of rural Pennsylvania, there was a town called Maple Hollow, where the air smelled of pine and freshly baked bread, and every evening church bells echoed softly through the valley. It was a town that waited for news, for hope, for letters. In those years, paper carried the weight of hearts. Envelopes sealed with trembling hands traveled across oceans, across gunfire, across silence. And every morning, the postman's bicycle bell would ring down the cobblestone street. Ding, ding, ding. And mothers, wives, and sweethearts would step out, their hearts beating with both fear and faith. Among them was Eleanor Finch, a young woman of 22, with soft brown eyes and hair the color of chestnut leaves. She lived in a small house with her mother, keeping a tiny flower shop that smelled of lavender and hope. Her fiancé, Thomas Avery, had gone to war 2 winters ago, a school teacher turned soldier. Before he left, he had promised her something simple. "If you ever doubt that I'm coming home, wait for the letter, Ellie. I'll write it myself." And so she waited. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and still no letter came. But she believed. Every evening she lit a candle by the window, not because it made the room brighter, but because it made her heart believe that somewhere far away, Thomas could see its light. Morning came quietly in Maple Hollow. Mist floated above the rooftops like sighs that had lost their way. And as the sun climbed gently over the valley, the sound everyone waited for echoed once again, the soft ringing of Mr. Whitley's bicycle bell. He was the postman, kind-eyed, always in a brown wool coat that smelled faintly of tobacco and rain. Every day he made his rounds, and every day hearts rose and fell with the crinkle of paper in his bag. He stopped first at the bakery, handed Mrs. Layton a letter from her husband in France. Then at the tailor's, where young Ruthie got a postcard from her brother stationed in Italy. At each door, tears came, sometimes of joy, sometimes of relief, and sometimes of both, because in a town like Maple Hollow, a letter wasn't just ink on paper. It was breath. It was proof that love was still alive somewhere in the chaos. When Mr. Whitley reached the little flower shop at the corner of Elm Street, Eleanor looked up from arranging daisies. Her hands paused midair. Her breath caught. The world seemed to hush for a heartbeat. But he only shook his head gently. "No letter. Not today," he said softly, tipping his hat. She smiled, the kind of smile that tried to hold back a storm. "Maybe tomorrow," she whispered. Then she went back to her flowers. Roses, lilies, and carnations, each one a message she couldn't send. She wrote Thomas's name on small scraps of paper and tucked them under the petals. It was her secret way of keeping him close. That night, as the wind brushed against the window, Eleanor opened her old wooden box. Inside were the letters Thomas had written before he left. 5 of them, each folded neatly, each smelling faintly of ink and cedar. She read the last one again. "Ellie, when the war ends, I'll take you to the lake, where the sky touches the water. We'll sit there until the stars learn our names." She traced his handwriting with her fingertip, as if touch could make memory breathe again. Then she closed the box and whispered into the dark, "Good night, my love, wherever you are." Outside, the candles still burned by the window, and far beyond the Atlantic, in a field of smoke and silence, someone whispered her name into the wind. Spring had come and gone in Maple Hollow. The lilacs had bloomed, the church bells had rung, and yet the letter never came. By now, the town had grown used to loss. There were empty chairs in kitchens, folded flags on mantels, and names whispered at night like fragile prayers. Eleanor still opened the flower shop every morning. She smiled for customers, tied ribbons around bouquets, and pretended her heart didn't ache with every bicycle bell that passed the window. But inside her chest, something had begun to change. Not the love, but the shape of it. It had grown quieter, deeper, like a candle burning in an old church, where the flame never moves, yet never dies. Then, one rain-swept afternoon, a stranger came into the shop. He was tall, in a faded army coat, with eyes that looked like they had seen too much and remembered too little. He said, "Do you have violets?" They were her favorite. Eleanor nodded and began to wrap a small bundle. When she handed it to him, he hesitated, staring at her, as if searching for a ghost he couldn't name. "You're Miss Finch, aren't you? You knew Thomas Avery?" Her breath caught. "Yes, I did." He said, "I served with him in the 82nd Infantry." "Then you know where he is?" He hesitated. "He wrote you a letter. He told me to give it to you if..." He stopped. "But I lost it. The fire took everything." Eleanor turned away, pressing her hands to her lips. For 2 years she had waited, believing the letter was still coming, that somewhere across the sea, a paper carried her name and his promise. Now she knew. It had burned before it ever reached her. The soldier's voice trembled. "He talked about you every night, Miss Finch, said you loved lavender and that your laugh sounded like wind chimes." A tear slipped down her cheek. Did he remember that? Every word he said. He died with your name on his lips. Before he left, he turned once more. "He told me to tell you something else. He said, if she ever doubts me, tell her I kept my promise, even if the letter never comes." That night, she didn't light the candle. Instead, she opened the window and let the wind carry her whisper into the dark. "I believe you, Thomas. I always did." When the war finally ended, the world exhaled. Church bells rang for hours, flags waved from windows, and people filled the streets, laughing through tears. Maple Hollow came alive again, like a garden waking from a long winter sleep. But Thomas Avery did not return. His name appeared months later in the local newspaper. Lieutenant Thomas Avery, missing, presumed dead, 1945. No photograph, no story, just words that took the breath out of the room. Eleanor folded the paper and placed it inside the wooden box with his old letters, 5 before he left and none after. One evening, she went to the lake they'd once spoken of. The air was warm with the scent of pine and honeysuckle. The water lay still, reflecting the first stars. She read his letter aloud one last time, her voice trembling. "When the war ends, I'll take you to the lake where the sky touches the water. We'll sit there until the stars learn our names." The war is over, Thomas. The stars are here, and I'm still waiting. The breeze picked up, the lake rippled, and somewhere deep inside the quiet night, it felt as if something unseen was listening. At the train station, a man in uniform sat alone on a bench under the lamplight. In his coat pocket was a tattered envelope with her name on it. He had found it months earlier tucked inside a burned soldier's diary near the Rhine, Thomas Avery's diary. The envelope had survived, sealed and untouched. The man, Samuel Holt, had promised himself that if he ever returned home, he'd deliver it. Now, after 2 years, he had found the town. The next morning, Samuel went to the flower shop. When Eleanor looked up and saw him, she smiled faintly. "You came back," she said. He nodded. "No, Miss Finch, I came to give you something." He handed her the envelope. She froze. "That's my name." "It was written by Thomas Avery," he said softly. "I found it near the Rhine. It's yours." Her fingers trembled as she touched it. "I waited for this," she whispered. "For so long." Tears glimmered in her eyes, not of sorrow, but relief. "You came home, Thomas," she whispered. "You finally came home." Months passed. The letter stayed on her bedside table beneath a vase of lavender. Maple Hollow healed slowly. Finch's Flowers became a place not just for bouquets, but for remembrance. People came to tell their stories, to whisper names into petals, to leave letters behind. One day, Samuel brought her a stack of old wartime letters never delivered. "Maybe they should have a home here," she said. And so they did. From that day, Finch's Flowers became known as For Every Letter That Never Came. Over the years, Samuel kept visiting. He and Eleanor grew quietly close, not as fire, but as warmth, not to replace what she had lost, but to honor it. One spring morning, he found her writing by the window. "What are you writing?" he asked. "A story about a letter that never came but found its way home anyway." He smiled. "Sounds like a happy ending." "Not happy," she whispered, "but peaceful. And sometimes that's enough."
She placed a bloom of lavender on the sill beside Thomas's letters. The candle flickered once and steadied again, burning bright and calm. Years drifted through Maple Hollow like pages in the wind. Children who had never known war grew up chasing fireflies down Elm Street. The postman's bell no longer made hearts stop. It simply sang of ordinary life. And in the corner of the town square stood Finch's Flowers, its paint faded by time, its windows full of color. Above the counter hung a brass plaque. Finch's Flowers, for every letter that never came. Inside, Eleanor Finch sat by the window, her hair now silver, her eyes still kind. Every evening she lit a candle, not out of longing, but gratitude. Samuel still came by often. They shared tea, silence, and the comfort of memory. One autumn night, as the first leaves fell, Samuel said softly, "I think he'd be proud of you." Eleanor smiled. "He taught me what love means, not the kind that ends with goodbye, the kind that leaves light behind." She placed Thomas's letter by the window, beside the candle, and watched the flame tremble across the ink. Outside, the town settled into sleep. The wind carried the scent of lavender through the open door. Eleanor closed her eyes and whispered, "Good night, Thomas. Good night, Samuel. Good night, my love." Her voice drifted out the window like a blessing. And for a moment, the night itself paused to listen. When dawn touched Maple Hollow, the candle was still burning. Faint, golden, unwavering. Visitors would pass the shop and see it glowing. They never knew the whole story, but they always felt peace, as if the flame remembered something the world had almost forgotten. Love that waits. Love that forgives. Love that never truly ends. And so, in the quiet heart of Maple Hollow, the candle by the window kept its promise to shine for every letter that never came and every soul who ever waited for one.